Happy 2025, everyone. This is Angie from Little Dumplings Nursery, and I'm doing a very quick little video here. I kind of tried to put my camera at a different angle and sit on a different side of the room to try to avoid some of the sunlight coming in the window. So hopefully we'll get a good video. But anyway, I just wanted to say hey to everybody. I know I haven't touched base with you guys in a while, and also to let you kind of updated where I'm at, what's been going on with me, and I wanted to talk a little bit about babies, paints, community at large, and whatnot. So the first thing I will start with, every year I get a baby for myself, or I make a baby for myself, and this year I did do 2 elf babies with the Louis sculpt, and I can't remember the name of the lady that sculpted the Louis head, but it's a cuddle head that sold through Trueborns, and it doesn't come with any limbs, so I looked for limbs and matched them up, and I got 2 sets of limbs. I had a friend named Janine to give me a set of Andrea Arcello original Harper limbs, which I love because I like the way that Harper looked like she was clapping. A lot of people didn't like those limbs. I did. And she gave me a set, and I was able to color match those. It took a bit, but I got it to work. And then I also got some limbs from another person that I purchased that are Amy Horn, not Amy, is it Amy? No, Doris. I'll get it right in a minute. Doris Hornbogen. I hope I'm not butchering that. And it goes with her sculpt, and I think it was Leander. And so they work really well. And that baby is for sale. He did not sell during Christmas, which I was really surprised, to be honest. But then a lot was going on during Christmas, so it may not have advertised him well. So he's going to be going with me to the Dolls of the World show, unless he finds a home before then. But let me show you those babies. I think you've all seen videos of them. But here's mine. He's been over here on my little shelf. So this is my Louis. You see what I mean about his hands look like they're clapping. And so there he is. I love this little guy. He's so cute and quirky. And he still has his Christmas outfit on. He's got some green Ico eyes. And I painted this baby with the BC Heat Set paints. And I did him and his twin at the same time. And it was my first time using the paints, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Let me show you the twin. Let me lay this one down. And the other one, the one I'm calling the twin, is the one that I'm actually selling. And they're a little different, even though they're done with the same paints. The limbs are different and the babies are a little different. Okay, here's the other one. He's a little bit longer than the one I'm keeping, just because his limbs are a little bit longer. And his hair is a little more red. I did not know until after I painted with these paints that the brown, if you don't add any blue or anything to it, this brown comes out to a very carrot red. And he also is more of a red blushy baby all over. So I was still getting a feel for the paints and how they cure and the colors and whatnot. They're very rich. So he's a very richly colored baby. And let's see if I can unzip him here so you can see some of his coloring a little bit better. I'm at the best angle for this, but anyway. So there you can see his coloring. It's very rich. And he's got a very unusual face. So this is a very quirky, elfy baby for sure. I have him in just a plain sleeper, and I had put him in a Christmas hat and red booties for Christmas season, but you could easily go towards the sage green family and dress him as a woodland elf. He would make a perfect woodland elf, especially with his eyes are a little bit darker green than the first one that I did there that I'm keeping. But anyway, there's the other one. And he also was painting with BC Heat Set paints. So, and that is Louis. And it made a really cool baby. The paints are, as you see, are holding up very nicely. So this baby's been painted a couple of months now. And his coloring has not faded, not one bit. And so they're very good. The vibrant coloring, if you do the vibrant coloring like I did on him, it holds very well. So I'm not going to bore you while I sit here and change his clothes. I'm just going to lay him over here to the side and fix him up later. But I had to tell you a little bit about what's been going on with me. Usually I close my nursery from Thanksgiving on, like officially Thanksgiving on is like nursery's closed. I don't paint. Usually I don't even paint in November at all. I think I did finish up these guys. I'd have to go back and look at the exact dates and piddled around with a couple of other things. But from Thanksgiving on, it has just been a whirlwind of activity at my house and busyness and things going on. So I did not do a lot as far as the Reborn community goes, or doing videos or talking to people and that kind of thing. But it was like we had Thanksgiving. I put the tree up the next day, and then we started with church activities and whatnot the first week of December, and it was just like every week or weekend something going on. And then we left here the 20th of December and went to Pigeon Forge and met our daughter and son-in-law and 2 grandchildren there, and stayed from Thursday through Sunday in Pigeon Forge. And I got to go to the Dolly Stampede, and that was our Christmas present from them. And we had a fabulous time. It was so cold. I was so cold, but we had a really good time. Came back, and then the next week I was in full Christmas mode, getting ready here, and then having family and whatnot. We had actually had Christmas with my parents before the Friday, Saturday before we went to Dollywood. So, yeah, it was really busy. So I haven't had a chance to really get back into my studio here, nursery, whatever you want to call it, and talk or do videos or do anything, or really even to evaluate where I'm going from here. I do have a spot at the Dolls of the World Expo, and I will have a corner table like I have had the last 2 years. And I'm probably, the only thing I've really been able to decide at this point is that I'm going to really try to focus on just babies. I've tried to offer an eclectic amount of things, like a lot of bottles, a lot of baby bloomer outfits. I did bags year before last. And I think this year I'm going to just really focus on, I've got several silicones I need to get painted up. I've got some partials, Bountiful Baby partials. I've got some minis. I've got like a little what is her name? It escapes me. I'll think of it in a minute. The lady that does the little silicones. Anyway, it's a Gloria sculpt that I have a male and a female, and I'm considering keeping the female, so I'm definitely going to sell the little boy. And then I have, let's see, what else do I have? I've got, I can't even remember what I've got. I'll have to go back and look. But anyway, I've got several things I've got to work on. And then I have several vinyl sculpts I want to get done. And then I have paints that I'm experimenting with and have been playing with. I want to go back to playing with those for the Reborn vinyls. So I have those kind of plans. As far as what do I plan to do this year, so last year I did something really different. Normally I would make babies and sell babies all year long. Last year I did from January to right before the show, so end of May. I was focusing really hard on just making stuff for the show. Went and did the show, made a ton of babies, and then came back and sold what was left over, and did not really make any more babies throughout the year other than the 2 you just saw. But and I may do it that way again this year. But this year I have, our youngest daughter has gotten engaged, and she's getting married April 27th. So I also have a wedding thrown right in the middle of all this that we're trying to get together. So I have a lot going on. Yes. So I'm going to talk now about paints. I got asked, and I'm going to try to probably change the camera angle here in just a minute. I got asked in one of my groups this morning if there was a comparison I could give at this point of the paints that I've tried and what the different heat set paints are on the market and what I think about them and that kind of thing. So I wanted to go back through. If you go through any of my stuff, you'll see different little snippets where I've done little test videos, tried this, tried that. I painted the 2 whole babies with the BC heat set paints and different things. So, and sometimes it gets you get kind of lost in trying to get so much information at one time. So I'm trying to come back together here and do something a little more concise. I'm sorry, I know I'm rambling. Let me stand up and come around to the camera and see if I can angle it down more now on my workspace rather than on me. Of course, you all know, as I've mentioned so many times before, that I have a ton of Genesis Heat Set paints, which I just actually had put a bunch of them up for sale and ended up trading them to someone for a kit. So, but I still have a lot of Genesis. So I still predominantly paint with Genesis. If you look back there in these two containers, they're full of Genesis paints and whatnot. Paints, mediums. These are both paints, actually. And then over in this other bin, I've got a lot of Heat Set mediums that are all in here. And then I have these things. So I have a lot of stuff to choose from. But I will say, first and foremost, Genesis is my favorite. That's the Heat Set brand I learned on. Yes, Genesis has left us all. Genesis has left the building. So we are all looking for different things now. And you're going to see me now, maybe my hands somewhat, but you're not going to see me, but you're going to see paint. But in the meantime, you know, we've had some different things to come about to replace Genesis. And, you know, I've played around with a couple of different things. Different people have tried different things. I've looked at others' tutorials. I've joined groups and watched what other people have said and talked about and whatnot. And I'm still in the information gathering stage for the most part. But I have come to a somewhat of a conclusion at this point on my personal preference. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And of course, personal preferences can sometimes change as well. So, we'll talk about that too. But anyway, the first thing I want to talk about is, well, I mentioned the BC Heat Set paint. So let's just go ahead and talk about that right now. So I've got a whole box right here of BC Heat Set paints. Some of this I bought, and some of this, Beatrice was actually very gracious to send to me to try different colors and whatnot, because she saw my YouTube video and saw that I had talked about her paints and been using some of her paints and whatnot. And there's not a lot of video information out there about the BC Heat Set paint that's done in English. So she was like, anything anybody who's using it can share, she, you know, and to help people from a positive standpoint is really helpful to her and her business. So she's been really generous. I noticed she sent several paints over to the Yofi Doll Show. I didn't get to go to the Yofi Doll Show, but I saw that she sent a lot of paints over to the Yofi Show for them to play with there. And I haven't heard what people thought, but and some of these I bought. I bought a lot of these little ones. I bought the bigger sizes she sent me, but I have a lot of both sizes. And then there is a medium that goes with it, and I've shown y'all that on another video before. Where did I put mine? It's a BC Heat Set liquid thinner, I believe is what she calls it. Let me see. Liquid medium. So she has a liquid medium, and this is kind of what she recommends using in the replacement of odorless solvent or citrus solvent or whatever solvent you're using if you don't want to use those. Or you can use the and then she also has a, where's mine? She has a thinning medium. There it is. She also has a thinning medium, which is a thicker product. And if you mix this in with her paint, then you can add a solvent in with the paint as well. And it works really good that way as well. And these are Heat Set products. So, this is what I found my overall personal impression and feeling of the BC Heat Set paints. I love the colors in the BC Heat Set paint line. She has a lot of beautiful colors. They are very high in pigment and have good color intensity in the jar, but you do have to use a little more coloring if you're going to do a wash. Like if you're going to thin it way down with the liquid medium, then you're going to have to use more coloring in with it to get the wash to a more intense coloring if you like that. If you're, say you're coming from the air dry community and you're wanting something that's similar to using an air dry and you're used to intense coloring, then you're going to have to use more of the paint to the liquid medium to get the kind of wash that you're used to. If you're one of these that's used to the very thin color washes that don't have as strong a coloring, and you do a lot of washes of more of a watercolor, translucent watercolor mix, then, you know, this works really well for that as well, and you would be just fine that way too. So you kind of have to play with it to find your middle ground. And if you go back and look at some of the little test videos I did, I kind of show with my mixing, which I'm not going to show all that today, but I kind of show that. So you can also mix the paint with just the thinning medium. What did I do with it? Thinning. There we go. Thinning medium. And that gives you a thicker application of the paint. And you can paint straight from that using just paint and this mixed together. And that reminds me very much of like when we would use the mixes in Genesis that were the authentic Reborn paints, where they'd added some kind of glazing gel or something to that and made a mix. That's what it reminds me of. And that works really well too. The thinning medium does add a little sheen, but when you're matting at the end, you can matte that down. So that's the only downside or take back or whatever with using the thinning medium, is that you'll get better color saturation with the thinning medium and the paint, but you'll get a little bit more sheen. And then if you're going for a more of a wash or whatever, then you'll get lesser color saturation and more of your translucent washes using the liquid medium. And then there'll be times that you may have to add a little more color to get a stronger color saturation if that's what you want. The downside, I won't say the downside, but the one thing I will caution you about with the liquid medium is that once you heat set it, your paints are heat set, but then if you go back over it with liquid medium in the next mix, you don't want to lift and pounce too hard, because the liquid medium can pull some of the paint back up that you painted before or muddy it just a tad. And I think that's because of the oil type base that's in it. So you just kind of have to watch that. And she says that in her instructions. So, so anyway, I like these paints a lot. Definitely like them a lot. If you are using the BC Heat Set paints and you want to make a comment about your experiences, then you're more than welcome to comment on this video. And so that is one type of paint line that is good, and I definitely recommend this to anybody that wants to try it. So that's one thing you can try. This is all heat set, and she has her own line of varnishes and everything else, which you can look into that more. Another line of heat set paints that I have tried, and I just got a few colors to try, and I just recently tried these, is the Gemini from Bountiful Baby. I've got their thinning medium. I've got their matte varnish. I love their matte varnish, I will be honest with you. And I got some colors, just a few. That's the Eyelid Purple, and that is a Power Oil Red 02, which is a nice cool red. This is a red, which is like your Genesis red. That is a very warm red, and some have said it even has a vibrant pink undertone to it. So you have to, most people are recommending to add blue to this to cut it, because most of our vinyls coming out nowadays are very warm. But if you're using one of those old bland Bountiful Baby vinyls that for a while they were putting out that had almost no color, then this might be a color that will work really well out of the jar for those. This is a yellow ochre. It works just like any other yellow ochre. There's your Phthalo Blue 02. Just like these colors. The only difference, like I said, the red is a little bit different of a red, but, and this is the Quinacridone Crimson. These colors are almost match for match, the same as Genesis Heat Set paints. I've not seen any difference at all. This one, I'm not sure, because it's not a color I used to buy in Genesis.
I always used the Powerall red in Genesis. So this is just a new thing for me to even try a red like this, to be honest. But not my favorite shade of red, but I don't know that I would have bought it in any brand of paint normally. I just got it because of those that like to play around with what they call a primary red. So primary red, in that case, a warm red is not my favorite thing to use. I tend to go with Powerall reds. They have their own thinner, which is another, it's an odorless paint thinner. And both of this and the Liquid BC Liquid Medium, you can also use them to clean your brushes. And I found that they both work very well for that. The Gemini thinner, I think might be, if I were comparing it to the BC one, I like the Gemini better. I have also used another thinner, which is in the McPherson's Exodus line, and it's the Exodus thinning liquid, which is, oh, I have one right here, the Exodus thinning oil. This one is I was told by Brenda that this is a synthetic oil that has a little bit of heat setting agent in it. I've tried heat setting all these oils by themselves, and whatever little bit of heat setting agent that's in here does seem to help this along, but also the synthetic oil that's in them all, or I don't know that the others are exactly synthetic oil, but whatever oil's in the others, your oil gets, when you heat set it gets somewhat absorbed into the vinyl and or, I guess evaporated out somewhat when it's heat set. So I find of these oils, Exodus is my favorite. I just think it heat sets the best and the most stable of them all. And when I say most stable, I didn't notice any lift off with it. And my next favorite would be the Gemini. And honestly, between the Gemini and Exodus, I really don't see that much difference, if there is any difference at all. I honestly don't know. But I would say they're equally as good and interchangeable. If you have the Liquid BC heat set medium oil, I mean, that one is good as well. It is a little more yellow. I don't know if you can see that. Let me find a full. And that container has a tendency to be oily on the outside. It is a little bit, you can see it more in a full one. It has a little bit more of a yellow tint to it. So it may or may not have some kind of a vegetable oil, linseed oil or something in it. I don't know. The Exodus, where am I at? There we go. The Exodus is totally clear. And I know you can't see into the Gemini, but if you go back and look at some of the videos where I squirted it out, it's totally clear as well. So that's why I think these two are very much the same. The BC's a little bit different. The BC, like I said, I wouldn't hesitate to paint with it if that's what you have. I like it fine. But since I have so much of it and these others too, for cleaning my brushes, I've been picking up my BC to clean my brushes and kind of saving the other two for actually painting with, because I typically prefer the other two to paint with, if that makes any sense. So that's just my preferences. And then as far as the paints go in the Gemini line, these paints, in my opinion, are the closest thing to Genesis I have found. In fact, they mix like Genesis. They cure like Genesis. They are translucent like Genesis. They look in the jar like Genesis does. I can't tell you. They may be a little bit more creamy than Genesis in the jar, especially if you've got Genesis like I do that's been sitting on your shelf a while. But they still, you can see it still holds a peak. So, if you're one like me that really, really, really likes the translucency of Genesis heat set paints, you love your Genesis heat set paints, you want something that you can take everything you learned about how to paint with Genesis and transfer it over and keep on going just like you always have, then I would say you would love the Gemini, because they are the closest thing to the Genesis I have seen. And from my personal preference standpoint right now, if I couldn't get my hands on anything else, this is what I would be getting, is the Gemini. And but I do, like I said, when I say if I couldn't get my hands on anything else, if I didn't have any Genesis, I really like the Gemini. I will just say I really like it. The varnish is so nice. It is very matte. You can go back and look at my videos. It's similar in consistency to Genesis products, and it does have a little bit, whoop, well, there we go. It squirted out on me. It has more fluidity is what I'm trying to say. So you have to be careful, like I just showed right there. When you pull it from the jar, you can squirt it out onto your work surface. I'm just going to let that, I'll just clean that up. So that makes it easier to spread because it's thicker. You do stir it before you put it on, just so you don't make sure everything's mixed well and that your matting agents are mixed. And it makes a nicely matte finish to your baby, but it's not that rough matte like the original Genesis matte varnish is, which was honestly too rough for most of us, or many of us. There are a few people out there that like that rough feeling, but anyway, this is, and I think this is a little more translucent than the original Genesis matte varnish, so I'll talk about that in a minute as well. Trying to keep moving along here before my battery dies. So the other thing is that, and I do not have any of the paints because I had the set of the starter set and everything, and it was just a little bitty original sample set, and now all I have left is from the Irresistibles Heat Set paint line. I still have some Liquid Thin. I don't have any of their paints. I did have their paints from the original sample kit that they came out with. If you go back in my old videos, you can see it, and I did some tests with it. And the Irresistibles Heat Set paints, when they first came out, were my least favorite paint in the new paints on the market. Over time, Esther has worked really hard with them, and I don't know if she actually changed the formulas of the paints or not, because I haven't had any more paints since the original, because I haven't had a chance to go back and revisit that. That's part of what I need to get back into. But I think they have a little bit stronger pigmentation from what I've been able to ascertain. And the other thing is that originally you had to use her thinning medium. I think it was her thinning medium, she called it, with the paints to make them dissolve good. Then you could add solvent. And later on, she came out with the Liquid Thin, and the Liquid Thin really changed the trajectory of her paints for everybody. And it is a white product. Let me shake it up here. Let me kind of squirt it out for those of you that may not have tried it or seen it. Let me put this. All right, let me go over here where I didn't squirt that Genesis, whatever it was, Gemini. So there you can see, it is a white liquid. I'm doing this on foil. There it is on my finger. It has a little bit of an oily feel to it. And it is white. It cures clear when it's heat set. It does not flash off. It will somewhat aerate on the piece, and that allows the product to become a little bit more stable if you want to let it sit before you go to put it in the oven, so that it's not as tacky feeling and easy to smudge. But it will not flash off the way that solvent flashes off, and so when it has to be heat set to be stable. But I mean, it doesn't have a flash off time in the terms of it. What's the word I'm looking for? It won't go completely dry looking, I don't think, before you put it in the oven. So that is something some people have not had a problem with at all. Some people have had to get used to that. That's just been a difference. And then there is a whole different way of painting now that they're doing, using the Liquid Thin and the Irresistibles Heat Set paint. And a lot of people are really loving it. The layers are more, how would I put this? I don't want to say thicker, but maybe kind of thicker. So they're building colors quicker. I've looked and watched on the group, and I've watched a lot of what a lot of people are doing with it. And I think that there are those people who have mastered painting with that paint and with the liquid thin and getting a translucent looking baby, especially with their darker skin tones. And there are those that I've seen paint darker skin tones and they didn't look as translucent to me. So that particular brand of paint is not something I've played around with enough to have a true educated opinion on the right, on the workings of it. But I can say that it is different. It is very different from that standpoint. And when I did get the original one, if you go back and look at my original video, and I have a belly plate here somewhere that I painted with it. The one that I painted that I did the belly plate with, I did it with the original thinning medium before she came out with liquid thin. And it did cure very translucent and looked good the way I did it. And the matte varnish, is pretty matte, and it is a white varnish. So depending on how much of it and how thickly you put it on the baby, you could end up with a little bit more of an opaque looking finish. I did notice that. So the liquid thin has really been the big game changer for this product line, for the irresistible heat set paints. And so if you're really interested in learning a new method and doing something a little different, then I definitely would recommend you check these out and go that route. And so the other thing I will say, that from all three of these heat set paint lines, they're interchangeable. You can paint with one and then heat set it and then paint with another and then heat set it and build them on top of each other. They can coordinate back and forth with your Genesis. I don't know about the liquid thin, if you can mix it with Genesis. I think you can. And I think you can mix the irresistible heat set paint with Genesis as well. But once again, I would suggest that you go join their Facebook group if you're interested in pursuing that line, and follow that Facebook group, because there's a lot of information there and you can find out a lot about what you want to know there. The Gemini mixes back and forth with the Genesis just fine, and so does the BC heat set paints. One thing I will say that I have found is that the Exodus thinning oil, that was the original thinning oil, that was the first one that came out on the market before BC came out and Gemini came out with their thinning mediums that were more fluid. I know from having played with this that you can mix this in with all these brands of paints and it works with all of them. It works with the BC heat set paints, it works with the Genesis, it works with the Exodus, and it also works wonderfully with the irresistible heat set paints. So if you are a little unsure about liquid thin and you would rather paint with your irresistible heat set paints and not use liquid thin, but you want to get away from using solvents, then you could try the Exodus thinning oil, or you could try the Gemini, because I think it would work as well. I don't know about the BC heat set paint one. It probably would, but I haven't tried it. But I just know that these two are so much alike that it should be fine. Alright, so the other thing that I have here, and we've talked a little bit about it, is that some people really like to paint with Winton oils. And this is going to be your cheapest, for lack of a better word. A lot of people like to say what's cheap. I don't mean cheap as in low quality. I mean most economical. So this is going to be your most economical route to paint. Oil paints was what we started with years ago when I first got into making reborn dolls in 2004. We were using oil paints. We were thinning them with linseed oil, which back then linseed oil was not as refined as it is today. So back then your linseed oils were more prone to turn yellow. Now they are more refined and they do better. But you can take the Winton oils, you can thin them with only odorless thinner or citrus solvent and paint and heat set it, and it will heat set and do really well. The only thing is that if you are not adding a heat setting agent to your palette, you can't leave this on your palette for more than a couple of hours before you start noticing it's going to start to set up on you a little bit. So the recommendation is, if you're going to paint with the Winton oils, that you take something with a little bit of a heat set agent and put in with it, which the one that we, and when I say we, I have tried it, and I know Emily Elliott, who does tutorials here on YouTube, she has tried it and even done a whole series with it, that if you mix the Exodus thinning oil in with the Wintons and then use your solvents, that you can then convert them to where they'll stay on your palette and not dry out. So that is another option. I do caution you, as I cautioned someone the other day, Winton oil paints are still oil paints. And so even if you're heat setting them and you're getting them to cure to the touch, they still have some air dry cure to the vinyl time. And over the period of 2 to 4 weeks, that's gonna get even more permanent to the vinyl. Honestly and truthfully, the same was true with Genesis. People just didn't realize it or notice it. But if you ever watch somebody painting with Genesis and they say, oh, I messed up right there, and let me take a toothpick and scrape a little bit out of my creases here. Or they're painting, I've seen this happen in tutorials with other brands of heat set paints as well, all of them actually, is they'll go back and scrape a little bit out of the crease there after it's been heat set. And that's because pretty much all these paints have some cure to the vinyl time. So that is just kind of, once they're heat set, they are cured, but yet they do continue to bond with the vinyl even better and more so over time after that. But the Wintons would take you maybe a little longer to do that. And that's just the only caution I would have about that, is just to handle them just a little more, carefully there when you're in the painting process, until you've had, a few days out that it's gotten more set into the vinyl. I hope that makes sense. Alrighty, so that's probably enough rambling for today. I'm going to